Good morning, everyone. It's Kay Francis, your host for It Is What It Is, or Is It? You know, in Knoxville, we had a few inches of snow and some ice, and I live in the back road, and they don't plow or do anything on the off streets, only the main highways and the main roads, which makes sense, but you're stuck. And I thought about it, after COVID-19, this didn't seem so bad to be stuck for a few days. In fact, it was kind of like a break, we had a little mini vacation. And thinking to myself, this isn't half bad. We should want to have a schedule like this where once a month we take 3 days off with pay, of course, and just relax. I mean, sign me up for it. I don't know how many would love it, but I guess there's a lot of you out there that would. The listeners, I'm happy you're back. And so I want to go on and talk about our today's podcast, which is a serious topic. And it's identifying toxic relationships. The title would make you think that it's easy to know it. Toxic, it's going to show its ugly head really fast. But that's not necessarily true at all. So, but when you think about it, when you first meet someone, and for a few months, don't we present our very best self? And then if you really think about it, do you start off really telling them maybe some of your, bad habits or whatever? No. And aren't we likely to agree with what they have to say, or, we're cautious. We're on best behavior. There's red flags very early on in toxic relationships. And unfortunately, not enough people pay attention to it. We get enamored with someone, and what do when these little red flags come up? Make excuses for that. We overlook it. We ignore it. And what eventually happens is the target, the person that's either entering into or is already in a toxic relationship, is feeling undervalued. They're feeling alone. They're feeling disrespected. And you can be sure that either if you're in one or newly going into a relationship, you do not want to ignore a toxic relationship. Initially, it just does seem like it's no big deal. Well, everybody has their stuff, right? They have their baggage. And so if you're real understanding, you accept maybe more than just a suitcase. You maybe accept a trunk of baggage. But as that pattern continues and you're running out of excuses, the good days are short lived, very short lived. It's like suddenly being caught up in a serious dust storm where you can't see anything in front of you, you can't see anything behind you, nor can you even see sideways to figure out how to get out of the storm. It's very similar to that. You no longer feel grounded in a storm like that. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a dust storm, but they're pretty bad. And you start to feel unsure of yourself and fearful because you can't figure out how to get out of this because you're not even sure what's going on yet. If the behavior is infrequent, let's say it only rises its ugly head once a month, which is once a month too often, by the way. Give it enough time. You figure if you have once a month, that only happens once a month, then you've got 3 weeks to collect yourself and kind of get your equilibrium back. And then what do? You start making excuses again. However, that behavior, as I pointed out, will most likely increase in frequency over time. Now, don't confuse this with domestic violence. I'm not talking about physical, not at all. I'm talking about mental, verbal, and emotional. So there's no physical that we're talking about here. So it wouldn't come under that title of domestic violence. That's a whole other topic. But if we study unhealthy relationships, we see that they're built on power and control and another person's unresolved issues. Interestingly, many people don't know the signs of a poisonous individual because toxic people are poisonous. But insults and shame, jealous accusations, yelling, put downs, maybe some shoving, other abusive behaviors are sure signs of that poisonous personality of a toxic relationship. The victim may begin to lose their identity in this process. They get confused about who are they anymore because things aren't, they're not grounded. They're in this storm. Um, and so they start self doubting because the person is most likely telling them it's their fault that they provoked them or whatever. And they get blamed for the cause of the problem. Toxic people, what do they say? Things like, it's all your fault, or you push my buttons, or you provoked me into this. You don't treat me right. They have all kinds of these remarks focus on you, never on themselves, never. Suppose one remains in a toxic relationship for too long. They are at risk of becoming mentally, emotionally, as I said before, very damaged. Some become anxiety ridden to the degree that they're almost always anxious all day, every day. They can become very insecure, very depressed, or worse yet, turn to drugs for self medication. They may isolate themselves from others and withdraw within themselves and withdraw even from friends. They're too embarrassed to ask for help, which that kind of sounds like domestic violence as well, that piece of it. But that's how damaging emotionally and mentally it can be. So, in preparation for our discussion today, I came across 15 characteristics of a toxic person and wanted to share these characteristics with you. Someone listening today may be in a toxic relationship or newly entering into one, or they may see some of these characteristics in themselves. Now, how many, if there are any of you out there, will want to face that, that's up to you. But I'm going to list the characteristics and you'll know whether there's something that fits for you. Remember, it goes back to your unresolved issues within yourself. It's interesting. Some poisonous individuals have an awareness of their behavior. They either don't have the means or the inclination or the desire to change. That kind of person usually doesn't change or get help. Others might be in denial that they're like that. And possibly if friends or anyone has tried to say something to them, they've brushed that off. They don't want to hear it. How many couples do you think keep ignoring red flags? Whether they're looking for a relationship, they're in one, so forth, so on. How many do you know ignore it? I'm here to tell you, in 40 years, I've worked with many. So, in preparation again, here are the characteristics. One, and I'm going to make little comments beside each one. The first one is destructive criticism is their daily language. And that doesn't mean they do it 24/7. And it doesn't mean that a day might go by that it doesn't happen. But that's basically their conversation, like putting you down. And it can be in little ways, belittling you, embarrassing you, and even with friends and others. I remember a woman telling me that she had been in a relationship with someone and started to recognize very quickly that he was making what he presented as a joke as really criticism of her or put downs. And he was doing it in front of people. And it started to feel really uncomfortable because it was upsetting her. That was a red flag. That's when she should have run right then and there. But again, we go back to how people will hang in for whatever. 2, they believe they deserve everything in life. Now, this is part of their unresolved issues. And so they're frustrated all the time because they don't have everything. Very few people have everything. 3, they want failure for others. That's what makes them feel good. They feel better about themselves if Joe Blow is failing. That means I'm not and I'm better. 4, this is interesting. They have no realistic goals. Isn't that interesting? And what I mean by that is that because they think they deserve everything, they may be in need of a job, but they won't take anything that they consider as beneath them. So their goals aren't really realistic. Or they decide that they should be a CEO. And so anything under that is not for them. But the truth is, they may never have done a job that even came close to being a CEO, but they deserve everything. 5, they often hide or tell half truths. Sometimes it's to cover up their behavior, like, oh, well, I was only joking. It's really a lie, or certainly a half truth. 6, they're afraid of change. They don't allow themselves to take an honest inventory of who they are not, and how they behave. Many people don't, but this particular personality for sure. So more than helping, they hinder, and generally they hinder only themselves. They have a gift of gab. So that's where people can be drawn in really quick because they just know how to talk. They can be interesting and they have a gift of gab. That wouldn't be necessarily the red flag that we would run from. But I'm just telling you that they can have that and they can override the criticism within that gift of gab. They're manipulative. 9, they generally have a charming appearance. They know how to fake good impressions. They're great at it. And 10, they demonstrate negativity and pessimism most of the time because that's what they feel. That is their mode of operation. 11, they are the victims. The world is against them. They can't let go of anything and are mostly unforgiving. Those are just piece of those unresolved issues that keep them hostile, criticizing others, putting others down, and showing behavior that is really not good and disrespectful. 12, they don't have a lot of goodwill, let me tell you. They may on occasion, but they only show goodwill when they're trying to impress others. 13, they use false empathy. And you say to me, well, Tay, what in the world is false empathy? Well, they fake it. That empathy isn't really genuine. They can fake it. 14, they could be envious, jealous, and they're very unhappy. These 3 characteristics seem apparent most of the time. Those are nice 3 red flags. When somebody's over the top jealous, that means they're projecting onto you what they would do and could do and probably have done. For instance, you're accused of cheating on them. You've never cheated on them in your life, but they accuse you of that. That's because they're projecting what they're capable of. And last but not least, they tend to steal time and energy from people. They have no consideration as to how much time they're actually taking up with their gift of gab or the manipulation or whatever, because they don't have the empathy to consider the other person. So if you are someone who demonstrates any of these characteristics, even if it's just 1 or 2, or you acknowledge at least that you have some, you need professional help. I understand anyone's need to avoid or deny they need help because it's difficult for any of us to recognize our weaknesses, or especially if it's toxic behavior. Who wants to admit to that? It's easier to ignore and to blame others. For your sake, I hope you awaken to your truth, whatever it is, and seek help because a life of misery is not very satisfying at all. Did you know that Moses, yeah, in the Bible, he felt inadequate. He was just an ordinary person like you or like me. He had no idea what was in store for him. But Moses, being ordinary, he also had a really bad temper and got himself into all kinds of situations with his temper. And his adequacy was an unresolved issue. But if you ever read Exodus, it's a very interesting book in the Bible about Moses because it really tells you his childhood, his background, and all of the different things. It's an interesting story to read, and I guess I've written Moses up because we're all ordinary. We're human. We're ordinary. He just happened to be picked to do something. But don't you know we're all here for some kind of a purpose? And if we listen close and we stay on a path knowing that that power is there, the King of Kings is there, however you explain God, because there's no words that can meet his power. But whatever that is, if you can stay on that road and not be distracted by the poisonous personalities, by toxic people, you have a great opportunity to make your life really pretty good, to say the least. For sure, you're going to be a more peaceful person and you won't be toxic. It has been my experience that the three most common issues that bring couples into my office are either over finances, sex, or communication. Mostly, believe it or not, in that order. And then sometimes you see toxic relationships for sure. If one or both are toxic, then it's very safe to say that the success rate is low, if not almost zero. I had a new couple come in one time years ago, and they were arguing coming through the door with each other. And I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a good time here. And they sat down, and each of them are screaming over the other one to tell me what's wrong with the other one. And I said, you know what? I'm going to let you save your money today. And I'm going to give you the best referral that I can give you. And that's for you to each go have your own therapist and work out your unresolved issues before you ever do marriage counseling, because you're not ready. I'm going to give you just some key points before closing. Toxic relationships, they have a negative impact on mental health. And you say, how? Well, they lead to anxiety, low self-esteem, chronic stress due to the constant negativity, and emotional manipulation. Controlling behaviors. A toxic partner might try to isolate you from your family, friends, make all the decisions, or monitor your very actions and activity. Verbal abuse, gaslighting, where the partner denies reality or makes you question your own perceptions. And this is very common in a toxic relationship, very common. Last but not least, lack of respect. A partner who is toxic may disregard your feelings completely or any boundaries. They step right over them. So I've tried to lay out today the importance of recognizing a toxic personality. Save yourself. There's a lot out there. And When they're charming, don't be so fast. And if you see that you're constantly feeling bad about yourself, something's terribly wrong. And you need to do something about it sooner rather than later. Let me just say also that what our next topic is, and it's called The Ladies on the Block. Now, mostly women are probably going to want to listen to this. The men are going to hear the description and the topic and say, it doesn't fit for me. But you might get a kick out of it anyhow. Maybe you'll learn something about women. I don't know. So that's what it'll be. So remember, always keep the faith, never give up hope, and know when to let go. God bless you.